Okay, hi, my name is Chloe Mowney. I am a third year social work major at the University of Cincinnati. I'm doing this project and presentation for my gender and political justice class. And I wanted to do something that would help me learn about something that could help me in my future career as well as do a good project for the class. So I chose the impact of second wave Black feminism on present day women in the US. So my abstract for the paper in this presentation and just an overall introduction is that second wave feminism started in the 1960s and lasted about a decade. There are some, like, I've seen different dates. I've seen it all the way up to the 1990s. So it can be different for different um, researchers. The effort was to gain equality for women's rights. It faced a lot of criticism for not including any marginalized groups and being mostly white women focused. The movement did not consider the idea of intersectionality and how different women encounter different issues. This decade in politics had these multiple decades in politics had a lot of different movements for equal rights for women, for race, etc., as well as many efforts against women's rights and equal rights. This included the civil rights movement, the movement and equality that Black women fought for during the second wave created the critical race theory, as well as impacting women's lives today still. So, just going over what politics were like in the 1960s, there were a lot of progressive and conservative movements that were going on. As you know, the civil rights movement was going on, as well as the feminist movements. There were a lot of branch offs of different women's rights movements for different groups. So there was different movements for Latinos and the Latinx community, as well as the LGBT community, as well as Black women, Asian women. There were a lot of different movements because the main second wave feminist movement was mostly white women. There were a lot of conservative movements, mostly religious movements. There was a lot of opposition to the progressiveness of women that came from Reagan's administration, as well as Phyllis Schlafly. Reagan was a very strong Republican president, and typically Republicans don't hold the same views that women are fighting for in a feminist movement. And Phyllis Schlafly was huge against the feminist movement. She basically was just saying that like women didn't want to have equal rights and have jobs and all of that, even though she did work a job herself. So that's interesting. What is second wave Black feminism? So in general, like I said, the dates are kind of different. So I put the 60s and the 90s. The general feminist movement, like I said, was mostly white, upper class women, which was not inclusive to the idea of intersectionality that Black and other raced women face. Um, and like I said, there were a ton of different feminist movements, and they all had sort of different agendas. Um, in general, Black women were pushing for welfare rights and Black liberation, which kind of mixed with the civil rights movement. But they didn't feel that they fit into either the feminist movement or the civil rights movement because the feminist movement was all white women and the civil rights movement was mostly Black men. So no one was talking about what it's like to like the intersectionality of what it was like to be Black and a woman. But a common goal amongst most of the feminist movements were based around sexuality. So that was like sexual rights, like reproduction, abortion, birth control, those kinds of things. That was a big push, as well as awareness, because there were a lot of sexual assault issues and harassment issues that were being brought up. So how is it affecting women today? A quote from one of my articles was that it paved the way for African American women to become political leaders, which, as we see today, we have our first Supreme Court justice who is a Black woman. So that definitely is emphasized as of right now, because they were all of the feminist movements that Black women were pushing, they are, they did make an impact on Black women's lives up until today. A big one was the Voting Rights Act, which, and then intersectionality, just bringing up the topic of intersectionality, because a lot of people didn't like think that that was a thing. Like they didn't look at the aspect of different parts of people's lives and how those like worked together to impact people's lives. So like a white woman is going to have a different life than a Black woman, or a Black man is going to have a different life than a Black woman. Just the intersectionality of different races, of different ethnicities, of different genders, as well as just like social classes. A big issue that we still have today is color blindness. Um, a lot of people think that racism doesn't exist anymore, and that Black people do have, Black people as well as other races and ethnicities have the same rights as white people, which is not true. But there are, I read an article that had a lot of information about how political leaders create laws to make it seem as if racism isn't a thing in the United States today. A big thing that I read also was Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders platforms. They used a lot of issues that were brought up during the second wave feminist movement, including abortion, which is still a very talked about issue today. They brought up, Hillary Clinton didn't necessarily address the aspect of colored women when talking about abortion, especially access. But Bernie, and she like just talked about women grouped together in general. But Bernie Sanders kind of broke it down and talked more about race and how different races, as well as like locations where people live, they're not going to have as good of access. So here are some pictures from the movement. There's a picture of Phyllis Schlafly, and she has a sign behind her that says "Stop the Equal Rights Amendment," because she did not want women to have equal rights. And I guess she did her job, because it still has not been passed. There's a sign for Black Women Matter, and just a lot of like solidarity and protesting. And then here are my references. Thank you.